Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on the Jagdpanzer E90. If you've ever wanted a German super heavy tank destroyer as a tier 9 premium, well then now's your chance to be able to pick one up inside the loot boxes. This vehicle hits really hard, 750 alpha, and it has amongst the best standard penetration that you can get on a premium tank of 290, meaning that you have a great opportunity to make a lot of credits without spamming gold consistently. The downsides of this vehicle are, the lower plate leaves something to be desired, and boy, it's got like a plethora of weak points on top for your opponents to be able to shoot at. But, you know, if you get it into the right position and use its awesome 9 degrees of gun depression, this thing can be fairly fearsome. So is this the new tank destroyer beast of the battlefield? Well, that's my job to let you know today. So let's take a quick look at the statistics before we jump into some big gameplay. So I'm going to be comparing the Jagdpanzer E90 to the standard tech tree, well, I guess we call it a super heavy tank destroyer, the Jagdtiger, the T-30, and also the Gonkavica. And while they are all different tanks, the Jagdpanzer E90 does have its own definitive playstyle. You'll at least be able to see some strengths and some weaknesses of the vehicle with this comparison. So immediately we take a look at the gun's caliber. 150, only trumped by the T-30 in this regard. This means that you can overmatch all 49mm caliber plates with your standard rounds, and only the T-30 has an advantage here with that ability to overmatch 50mm plates. Its DPM is neither good nor bad. It's not bad like the T-30, but it's not good like the Jagdtiger, and the Gonkavica absolutely destroys it with 3,200. But remember that the Gonkavica will lose its alpha damage when it goes beyond 50 meters. And the Gonkavica, of course, with that 800 alpha, tops the Jagdpanzer E90 as well. Now, while this vehicle's standard penetration of 290 is amazing, like even better than the Jagdtiger's standard pen of 276, when we look at the premium pen, it's 334 heat. Now look, 334 heat is not bad for a premium tank, but when we take a look at the Jagdtiger, for example, it's 352 APCR, which I would rather have in a heartbeat. Accordingly, the Jagdpanzer E90, considering what a big gun this has and how good the standard pen is, its premium rounds are barely better, actually, when you take into account the 5 degrees of normalization that you lose. However, of course, with having heat rounds on this tank, you'll be able to shoot at thinly armored plates that you can't overmatch that are angled at between 70 and 85 degrees. So, gun handling wise, on the Jagdpanzer E90, it's pretty good news for such a big gun. 2.6 seconds aim time, pretty good in this comparison. 0.35 accuracy, again, pretty good for such a big gun. The movement dispersion of 0.16 and turning is the best in this comparison as well. However, when we look at the turret reverse dispersion, 0.16 is horrible. Now, somebody asked me yesterday, is there a point of having snapshot on a tank without a turret? Yes, there is, because when your gun turns between the limited gun arc that non-turreted tanks have, you still use turret reverse dispersion there. So something like snapshot will actually reduce that. Accordingly, that means that this vehicle blooms out quite a lot when it's turning the gun, twice as much as the Jagdtiger and the Gonkavica, which is frustrating. However, the gun depression on this tank of 9 degrees is lovely. 1.5 degrees better than the Jagdtiger and 2 degrees better than the Gonkavica. This means that the vehicle can actually work on a ridgeline, and importantly, it can help hide the weak points that are on top of the vehicle when you find those perfect positions. However, now on to my least favorite aspect of the vehicle, and that is the gun arc. It's only 5 degrees to the left and 5 degrees to the right. Accordingly, what this means is this tank, it just really struggles at being able to keep pace with its opponents as they try to traverse around you. This is the same as the Gonkavica, and everybody who's played Polish tank destroyers will know how much of a pain it is, especially when you're coming around a corner and then your tracks kind of bump into the wall because you don't have the gun arc to be able to turn the gun around to engage your opponents. This forces you to have to overexpose your tracks as you come around a corner, and the fact that it's twice as bad as a Jagdtiger, which I wouldn't say is the most flexible of fixed turrets, it's horrible. It's definitely my least favorite aspects about the Jagdpanzer E90, and it's almost so frustrating that a lot of people will just not enjoy this tank because of it. So now onto the mobility. This vehicle is a heavy vehicle. It weighs 120 tons, nearly twice of what a Jagdtiger weighs and over twice of what a Gonkovica weighs. So this means that its engine power, which is very impressive, 1,310, is not actually so impressive with regards to power to weight ratio. It has the same power to weight as the Jagdtiger. That's not good news, and massively worse than the T30 and the Gonkovica, where the Gonkovica feels like it's more of a medium tank with higher alpha and higher DPM getting around compared to the Jagdpanzer E90. This also limits the vehicle's top speed, which is 10 kilometers an hour slower than the Jagdtiger, and like the Gonkovica is traveling 50% faster than this tank, and the reverse speed is no better at 12 backwards, the same as the Jagdtiger and the T30, which is not good. However, Wargaming have actually taken pity on this tank and given it the best ground resistances in this comparison, but only by a tiny amount compared to the Jagdtiger. And when you take into account using something like off-road driving, that means that the Jagdtiger is going to be negating that disadvantage that it has. Another thing that sucks about this tank is the tank traverse. 20 degrees a second, massively worse than the Jagdtiger here. The Jagdtiger literally has 50% better traverse speed, so you're easily able to stop people from flanking you. In the Jagdpanzer E90, I had massive frustration with trying to re-engage opponents to my left and to my right. Just horrible how quickly this thing turns, and it's very, very easy for even reasonably medium speed heavies to be able to just loop around the Jagdpanzer E90. So always make sure you've got a corner to be able to get your butt to the wall, otherwise your opponents are going to get behind you and then laugh at you as they farm up your hit points. So now on to the armor. 180 at the front and 140 at the side. Wow, that side armor looks very impressive, but that frontal armor, not so impressive, compared to the Jagdtiger at least. So when we take a look at the armor model that this vehicle has, we notice that the lower plate is 140, which is actually really good when it's angled, but only against, should we say, like tier 7 and tier 8 tanks. But when you do meet them, you can pretty much just angle like this, and they won't be able to pen you outside of shooting the weak point on top or shooting the inside here. This will be a super easy pen, even for tier 8 or tier 9 tanks, if it's trying to do this to you and kind of like use its amazing side armor. The lower plate still is the weakness, even angled like this. That's how thick the side is. And so if you're getting engaged by opponents which are low tier and not firing gold, you really want to over angle the Jagdpanzer E90. But don't do this against decent pen guns, otherwise they'll be locking down your track post haste, and that's the last thing that you want, because if you give your side to your opponents like this, they might just go all the way, and then with its terrible traverse speed, you're not ever going to be getting your gun back on them. Armor-wise, the weak point on top, it's like 220 millimeters thick, which is not bad. It's not bad at all. Again, against lower-tiered opponents, you don't really have to worry so much. But the best thing about this tank is as soon as you're using your gun depression, that weak point is no longer visible, and actually it becomes like 250 millimeters thick, which is a hard thing for even standard rounds on high-tier vehicles to be able to get through. When you're not using your gun depression, the structure armor of this vehicle is like 280, so it is very vulnerable to premium rounds, but yeah, standard rounds are going to ricochet off it. When this thing uses its gun depression, however, that upper hull becomes very hard to pen. You're going to need very, very good tier 9 and tier 10 tank destroyer rounds to be able to go through it. Funnily enough, you'd actually, if in this situation, if you're shooting at the Jagdpanzer E90, you'd actually want to shoot at the beak with your gold rounds, but you need really big pen to be able to do so, and the further up you go, the better the armor gets. It has no mantlet weaknesses, which is absolutely lovely. Against high pen AP, there are some tiny little points they can be able to pen, but I'd say all in all, when you get this thing into a hold down position, it is a behemoth. Be warned, however, the flaps on this tank are only 30 millimeters thick, so that means that opponents can be able to shoot up at you and track you and damage you as you crest a ridgeline. When you get the broadside of this vehicle, it's not particularly good. And also it's got these interesting, I guess, doors on the back, entry points that only have 40 millimeters of armor, so HE rounds will be able to absolutely obliterate the back of this tank. So aim for that hatch, and yeah, the Jagdtiger is going to be, well, the Jagdpanzer, sorry, is going to be wincing. So one thing that's really disappointing about this tank for me is that it only gets 1,800 hit points. I honestly thought like a juggernaut like this would have some hit points to be able to go around, but the fact that it gets the same hit points as a Gonkovica and less than a Jagdtiger means that when the armor starts failing, aka you're not in that perfect position, yeah, it doesn't really last that long. On top of this, it has horrendous camo rating, which is twice as bad as the worst tank in this comparison, the T-30, and 4 times as bad as the Gonkovica. So that means while the Gonkovica is able to sit in bushes or be able to just get around the map unspotted as if it's like a fairly sneaky medium tank, the Jagdpanzer E100 is lumbering around and getting caught. Then the 370 meters view range doesn't really do very well for this vehicle when you are on those long-range spotting maps, and you're going to probably want to take something like coated optics to be able to make up for it, but only on extreme sniping scenarios. So, crew-wise, this vehicle will work the same as your Jagdpanzer E100 crew, I believe -1 loader, unless I'm being silly here. However, that's okay. 5 skill crew, you'll have more than enough German crew members for this tank. So on the commander, I would recommend taking brothers, repairs, recon, emergency coordination, and practicality. I really wouldn't bother with the concealment on this tank. It's only going to improve it if you max it out by 2% when moving. I think it'd be better to just invest into another crew skill. For your gunner, I'd recommend brothers, repairs, Deadeye, armorer, and then I probably wouldn't take concentration on this tank. I would take snapshot. The reason why I have concentration is because I'm using this on the Jagdpanzer E100, and that tank with its 1050 alpha damage, I'm often having to sit still and really want to make those snipes happen. However, it still works with the 750, but I would rather take snapshot for the vehicle's horrible dispersion when turning the gun. On your drive, I'd recommend brothers, repairs, off-road driving, engineer, clutch braking, and then controlled impact if you can get it as well. For your radio operator, brothers, repairs, firefighting, situational awareness, probably jamming and then side-by-side. Good crew skills to take on this tank. And for your loader, I'd recommend brothers, repairs, ammo tuning, or intuition first, depending on which flavor you want to have. And then I'd go for skills like close combat and maybe even adrenaline rush on a vehicle like this. I didn't seem to get ammo racked very much when I was playing this tank, although I guess the gameplay will see if I'm remembering well from yesterday. For your equipment on this tank, most players will want to take a gun rammer, a durability, and a turbo. For me personally, with the great alpha damage that this vehicle has and the not amazing kind of accuracy and everything else the vehicle has, I'm personally using vents instead of a gun rammer, but most people will do better with the gun rammer instead. For my second build on this tank, using a bit of a weird build here, I'm using gun rammer, vents, and binoculars on this vehicle, but I'm only going to use that when I really want to camp at long range on maps like Prokhorovka, maybe even Malinovka, although to be fair on Malinovka I think you'll do better to try and contest the heavy tank flank using the, should we say, the fighting build of the durability and the turbo and probably the gun rammer. And I'd use this on maybe even Muravanka as well. You know, if you want to try and spot, you might as well change your builds to try and match the kind of maps that you're playing on. You could probably drop binoculars to use coated optics as well on this tank, but I feel like if I'm going on those long-range spotting maps, I might as well go all in for the spotting. So field mods for this tank, nice and simple. You must take reinforced suspension. This revolutionizes how fast the tank is and how durable your suspension is. Follow it up with some accuracy, then take the view range on this tank. For the slot bonus, I would recommend taking the survivability to be able to improve that durability device as much as possible. And for the final field mod, it's kind of up for grabs, but personally for me, I would rather sacrifice the 80 hit points to be able to shave off a second off the reload. Easy pick, at least in my opinion, but be warned, if you do this, your crew are going to get damaged much more, so you might even have to start buying a premium med kit for this arguably paid advantage. If you're an absolute free-to-play player, you might not want to take this or even go the other way, but be warned, you'll be making your reload significantly worse. Anyway, I think that's quite enough jibber-jabber. Let's get stuck in with the Jagdpanzer E90. Alright, so here we go. It's 4 Jagdpanzer E90s versus 4 Jagdpanzer E90s. Man, after Wargaming released those loot boxes yesterday, I got so much tier 9 only matchmaking, and for me at least personally, who likes the variety in the game, that is not a good thing. But, you know what, it's probably temporary, right? It'll go back to regular kind of matchmaking fairly soon. That TPT is having a good time by the looks of it. Off into the water, although I didn't really see that he got kind of police turned or pit maneuvered by the Jagdpanzer E90 towards my left. So get an idea of the speed of this tank. It's definitely at the back, unless you've been bullied by Jagdpanzer E90s apparently. It takes a while to be able to get into position, but sometimes good things are worth waiting for, right? We'll have to see whether that is the case here. Look, this vehicle, if you go and take it to a sniper flank, you're doing it wrong. I know I said that I had that second build of using either the coated optics or the binoculars, but that's just for those maps where, like Prokhorovka, where there's really nothing better to do. I would use this build, either the gun rammer or the vents with the durability and the turbo, on 90 to 95% of the maps inside the game. And your goal in this vehicle should be get towards a heavy flank, try and use as much of your gun depression as possible, and punish. There you go. That's it. That's all you need to. But oh my gosh, look at that. Look at that pen just for a second. That's gone right through the upper armor there. So you need to make sure that you're using your gun depression. Otherwise, it's not particularly good. So what you're going to see me do quite a lot when I play the Jagdpanzer E90 is seemingly drive around in awkward fashions to try and find angles. And the way that I recommend you do this, okay, this is a skill that a lot of you really have to master with the E90. So what you want to be doing is dragging your mouse down to make sure that your gun depression is at its maximum. And then what you want to do is make sure that you're using as much of that maximum gun depression as possible when you crest the ridge. So, for example, looking at this slope here, this is probably, I know I'm not going to be able to depress with 9 degrees, but maybe if I like move over here more, I'll be able to try and like soften the gradient of the slope and then find a position where I'm hopefully using 9 degrees of gun depression as much as possible to make sure my armor is efficient. So you'll see that I'm kind of like going down here and I get caught right in the top, but at least I catch the Jagdpanzer E90 back. And it looks like the guy must have gone through, it's only marked my viewport there, but it must have hit the viewport, which isn't actually a damaging location on the vehicle, and gone through the weak point at the back. So you see how I'm kind of like working awkwardly here and trying to drag down my gun and realizing it's just not quite going to work here. And then what I'll do is probably start to move over towards the right later on. But when you eventually get this tank into that perfect position by shimmying and you're using as much of your depression as you possibly can, oh, it's very good indeed. So I'm going to try and shoot through the forehead of the E75 there, thinking that my heat rounds could be able to do so. But considering I'm aiming up at him, it's a little bit of a misplay here. And I'm taking a look at the mantlet as well and figuring out if the mantlet protects the vehicle a little bit. And you could, in fact, raise your gun just a little bit in between. So again, I'm going to try and shoot at the rim of the front of his vehicle there, and I'm unable to get through him. But luckily, it looks like he's unable to get through me as well. And so, as a rule of thumb with this vehicle, as long as you're hiding the lower plate on a ridge, and you're using as much of your gun depression as possible, and you can feel that by dragging the mouse down, then that is going to mean that your vehicle is fairly protected. So you see how I'm always trying to get backwards as far as possible to use as much of the gun depression as I can? That is your key to victory in this tank. And when you start to master that, in positions where you can manage to make that work, then you are actually starting to get very, 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 very dangerous in this vehicle. So unfortunately for me, the M103 goes out in front, so he's created an awful position for us to try and shoot across, and it looks like the TBT is doing it as well, and my whole team just seems to want to drive in front of the enemy and get them into safe positions now. So I'm hoping, reload, E75, just dab that W key to get forwards. And these heat rounds aren't working very well against the E75. But these are the kind of situations where as long as you're safe, you just got to keep throwing stones until kind of like one of them sticks, right? And then hopefully the E75 is going to run out of rubber, right? Oh gosh, what am I, back on the schoolyard now? Possibly. I don't know what this 430 is doing, but I can't really change my position very much. Because there are very few positions that you can get into with the E90 where it's absolutely perfect for the way that the gun works. Luckily, we finally find it. The E75 takes a big old hit, and man, is it satisfying when you hit for 750. Unfortunately, the Jagdpanzer E90 on my team drives forwards, gets themselves into an awkward position, and I'm going to try and shoot underneath them here, and I really didn't want them to die there, because if they died there, they'd be blocking my line of fire again. So hopefully we're just waiting for our perfect opportunity, and there we go. And man, when you hit with this tank, that is satisfying. And if you're penetrating those regular rounds, it is very profitable. And you know what? Because the alpha damage is so high, you don't really mind spending the thousands of extra credits on the gold rounds when they do manage to hit. And look, this is just Jagdpanzer E90 in a nutshell. You get into a position, you have your opponents in front of you, and you deal with them. And if you ever get into a position where you don't have your opponents in front of you, it is absolutely ugly. Ugly indeed. So you need to try and do everything that you can with regards to your map knowledge. And to be fair, that was really bad armor knowledge there, shooting at that Jagdpanzer E90. Should have watched my armor review, QB. You can't go through that part of the armor. Even though it looks like it's yellow, it's not worth shooting at. I should have just waited. I wasted one of my remaining heat rounds. But again, you see me trying to like use that gun depression to bait the E90 now. And actually, I managed to find... Oh... Looks like I actually hit his viewport there. I hit the part that he actually hit earlier, but because I was firing heat, it gets absorbed. I should have fired AP in that situation. But oh, look at this. Delicious. Gun depression used, 9 degrees. And what are we going to go for here? The Jagdpanzer E90, or am I going to go for the E75? I'd rather finish off the E75, but in this situation, I'm going to have to also shoot the Jagdpanzer E90. Bounce his AP shell. Going to try and angle. He goes through my weak point on top, but that's fine. I can take that hit, and he's not going to be able to take the hit from me. Am I going to go for this E75? I can actually probably just aim down on his armor here. Yeah, I mean, that's 290 pen there. And we managed to actually avoid the ram from the E90, and they missed their shell again. And again, I'm going to be able to aim down on their hull armor here. If I just try and back off a little bit, shoot the upper hull there, and boom, easy from this kind of an angle with the 9 degrees. So don't try and face hug the E90. It doesn't work. And while, look, if you all think that I'm about to have like a 1 versus 7, I'll very much disappoint you. But in this situation, I'm running a credit booster. The Holiday Ops credits bonus is running. I just want as many credits as I can. And we put in a big old 786 hit there to be able to finish them off. I don't want to get hit by that E90. I'm hoping the T10 rams me for a little bit of hit points, and maybe I can get back and avoid him now, but alas, it's not the case. But this was the Jagdpanzer E90 in a nutshell. 6,600 damage. Lovely in this engagement. And while I drove to the same part of the map and I basically just lived there for the rest of the battle, guys, if you don't like this kind of gameplay, then this is not going to be the tank for you. Because while it can play like an assault tank, and it can attack and can go on the warpath if it has some heavy support and it's willing to trade its hit points to be able to use that big alpha. If you want to play solo and you don't have a team that is willing to go with you and engage, really just holding the line is the best thing this tank can do. So round 2, Jagdpanzer E90, now not against a full juicy tier 9 matchup, although in a weird way I would rather be playing against tier 11 tanks just for like the spice that it adds to the variety. So I got my wish. So let's see what we can do now against the tier 11s, and that is, looks like the Manticore managed to spot me on the enemy team, so let's drive away from them as quickly as possible there, so we're outside of their render distance, and it'll make it much harder for them to be able to hit me. So yeah, guys, this tank's camo is absolutely horrendous. You have as bad, if not worse, camo than heavy tanks, so do not think that you can get around the battlefield sneakily. So to make sure this video isn't going to end up being like 30-40 minutes long, I'm going to skip the... That was a minute, by the way. I skipped a minute there, guys, from driving from there to there. And just look, you are literally the last one to the heavy flank, always. Even against tanks that you wouldn't consider to be very slow, like an AE Phase 1. And we're so slow that the event has already happened before we got there. But not really too much of a concern, because it actually provides a lot of interesting hold-down opportunities for this vehicle. Okay, so Jagdpanzer E90. It's the last one into position, but at least in this regard, I have by far the most dangerous gun out of all of these vehicles, and I believe comparable DPM to everything apart from the Type 68. But we've got to be careful here. Remember, our tank is so tall, and our side armor is so poor, that if we get shot from down below the hill, and you can see me constantly looking over on the right to make sure I'm not going to get caught from that position, I would not be a happy chappy about it. So a BZT-70 above, a KR-1 above, and because I'm not using my gun depression, you know that weak point is going to be sticking up right now like a sore thumb. Look at that. So gun depression, good. No gun depression, oh, terrible. Especially in matchups like this where they're going to have more than enough penetration to contest it. As I showed that when you're using at least a little bit, it's got about 240 millimeters of effective armor here. So interestingly enough, we've actually been flanked, but I don't seem to really realize it right now. And a little bit of a delay. But actually, funnily enough, it's not the person who hit me in the front. It was actually the TBT shooting me in the weak point. Well, it wasn't the person shooting me from behind, I should say. It was the TBT shooting me in the weak point from the side. So I'm going to tell the Type 68 that I'm going to help them. And I'm going to take a wide angle so I can come around with my armor facing towards my opponents. Remember, this vehicle has that awful gun arc. And, oh, this is what I want to see. Oh, yeah. Easy pen there on the side of the 7.52. And I'm just keeping an eye out down below to make sure that I'm not going to get caught in the side. Really, this vehicle, I can't emphasize it enough just how awkward it is with how tall the vehicle is. And that side armor, it might be good when it's slightly angled, but it's not going to be good when you get caught out. But in this kind of a situation, it's kind of like just perfect for the E90. You don't really want to be the person at the front focused in a matchup like this. You want to be kind of like on that midline and just doing your dirty work. And we could actually see the concentration ticked in there for a second. Pretty nice to be able to gain that extra like 4 to 5% accuracy, depending on how much crew skill you have, including the premium consumable and vents on this tank to be able to make that shot work. So the T95 misses. I'm going to sit still, hopefully get my concentration active. Actually, I don't wait for it there. I probably should have waited for it there. I had the time to be able to wait for it. And I'm not sure if that T95 with the wiggling gun actually caught it. I don't think he really will. 290 AP pen is going to go through that gun and go through the weak point anyway if I manage to hit it clean and I don't go off the side. And in this kind of situation, this vehicle's just really lovely. Like, he can't pen me, I can pen him. I'm using my gun depression, rock on. And yeah, the E90, this is what it does. Always make sure you're using your gun depression and just manage to keep clubbing your opponents. But be warned about getting caught at funky angles, and always keep looking around you to think about where you're going to get caught if you try to make cheeky plays like this. And oh yeah. Great, we moved just before the KR1, got the fully aimed shot, and just look for opportunities like that, where you can go and get that pretty quick 750 alpha. And I tell you what, this gun with its 2.6 seconds aim time and fairly good accuracy, you are able to do some really cheeky shots on this tank. Really cheeky shots on this tank. And for 750 alpha, it does feel very rewarding. I feel like, as an opportunist, boom, baby, right through the new BZT-70, rebalancing it there. Wonderful. I really feel like, as an opportunist, this thing is better than a Jagdtiger. The Jagdtiger is more this vehicle that just wants to like go in and trade its big hit points with for its big DPM. This vehicle, on the other hand, it's got to be played a little bit more intelligently, even though it's a pretty big, cumbersome, stupid tank, funnily enough. So you see me going back here, and I don't want to reverse all the way. What I want to do is reverse for an area which has the biggest gun depression opportunity, and it'll be right here. This is just something, or maybe like right here, I guess. It's something that you will only gain through playing a lot of World of Tanks and knowing all of the different map locations that you can use. And interestingly enough, I can actually use my weak point now, while it's moving, to spot these opponents. I need heat for the Conqueror here. Beautiful shot right into the top, and that puts the pressure on him. And now I'm going to go at an angle where my side armor will still be good and my frontal armor will be a little bit better. But the reason why I want to go side on here is actually to make my weak point moving left and right for them. Because if I can make my weak point moving left and right for them, and I've actually decided I want to just keep moving and hopefully dodge him. But when I see that I can't dodge him anymore, that I'm just going to have to go for that lower plate. Interestingly enough, the weak point is so tall and so bad that we're actually getting shot in the side over the ridgeline. And this is why you've got to keep moving. The second you don't move is the second that your opponents are going to be able to hit that "shoot me here" icon on top of the vehicle. So another tier 11 going after me here. I'm going to reload AP and take a swing, but unfortunately the shell just goes wide. Maybe I could have kept the heat going there. It's definitely one of the advantages of taking vents instead of a gun rammer on this tank, is that your reload will actually be, or should I say your shell switch will actually be a lot faster. And considering this vehicle does have, should we say, a big difference between its rounds, a bit like on a Jagdpanzer E100, intuition is essential on this tank. It's just whether you wanted to sacrifice that rate of fire to be able to gain that kind of like holistic advantage in those areas. It'll just be down to you on a player about what you want to focus on. And so in this kind of a situation, I just want to go forwards, backwards, keep that weak point moving, try and keep spotting. And remember, you can actually spot from the weak point, so that means that you don't actually have to expose until you can shoot your opponents to be able to shoot them. However, you know, I really want this shot on the 432, and I feel like I should have exposed more, but if I had, probably that K90 or KR1 would have been able to get me. And unfortunately in this situation, if you're wondering why my friends aren't shooting for me, it's because the FE405 decided to go AFK and actually leave the game. Maybe they got bored, maybe they got frustrated, they got shot, but they left the battle, so they weren't able to help me. Nevertheless, 6,300 combined in the worst possible matchup, and this shows you the kind of rolling retreat gameplay that you will have to learn in a Jagdpanzer E90. Always, always, always make sure you're getting back to find a little defensive position that you can use. And if you're able to find one of those where you can use the vehicle's awesome 9 degrees of gun depression, this thing's formidable. So now time for a trusty game of Himmelsdorf in a tier 10 matchup. And you see me just sitting here because, frankly, there's just absolutely nothing that I can do right now. And quite often, this was a frustrating thing that happened to me in the E90. It's not fast enough to get into positions that it wants to use first, and there are very limited positions where you could actually be able to use this tank. What can I do? I can't really just go down the alleyway here and expose all of my lower plate and my weak point on top to all of these vehicles. So I really need that position that the IS-7 is in. Luckily, the blimp crashes on Himmelsdorf fairly quickly, and that means that I can be able to get into position to be able to start to use my gun depression. I was looking for an opportunity on the XM57, however that wasn't there, and now that the blimp has arrived, that means that we're going to be in a fantastic scenario. So let's get that gun depression up, bounce, and punish. And there we go. We've managed to find the god tier position for the E90. It's really frustrating in this vehicle because on maps such as this and on maps such as Ghost Town, there are actually very limited opportunities for positions like this. And so what that means is that usually it's the first tank that's there that has the position, and in this case it was the IS-7. But luckily, they didn't react quick enough to be able to, I guess, retake this position. And it does sound sad, but in a tank like this, which just wants to get into a position and just be like the meatball here, you are kind of in competition with your allies to be able to get this position. What you see me doing here, now by the way, if any of you are interested, is you want to use as much of your gun depression as you possibly can to hide the weak point on top, but you also need to make sure you hide your lower plate. So do you see how I'm literally between the margins here? I go 1 degree too high and they'll see my lower plate. I don't, and it's perfect. So this is it's quite a fun tank in a way to how you can use your armor. And very good players will be able to do disgustingly good things with their armor on this vehicle. And, oh, there we go. This tank, I have to admit, I had so much fun just clubbing through BZT-70s. And considering how, like, big and whiffy their gun is, it's quite hard for them to be able to catch your weak points. And considering this thing has, like, infinitely better gun handling than they do, you just wait, time it, and punish. The guy gets me good there, however. I'm not sure exactly where he managed to hit me. Looks like he hit me just in the lower plate, so I was using a bit too much of my gun depression there. And I feel like I've got the rate of fire on this BZT, so I'm just going to go after him. And kablamo, thank you. Easy, easy, easy. And yeah, let's push your advantages, right? Know when you do have those advantages against your opponents. Unfortunately, this IS-7 catches me, but considering I'm fighting higher tier tanks in a tier 9 tank destroyer, guys, remember, this is not a tier 10 TD, right? I'm fighting an IS-7, and I'm fighting against the BZT-70, and I'm giving it to them just as good as they're giving it to me right now. Like, this is not a tier 10 TD we're playing, but it's having kind of like tier 10 competition on these ridge lines. So, wonderful stuff like that. And again, we just find this nook, make sure we're going for it, and I go forwards to tell him, like, I'm coming after you. But actually, it's just a bluff. He has the rate of fire advantage on me. I wanted to threaten that I was going to ram him to make sure that he didn't try to attack me there. And yeah, he took the bait, and so that means that we get to live to fight another day. I'm just realizing, is this going to be a tank review where I lose every single one of my games while also having big results? I'm not sure if that happened to any of you yesterday. Spoilers, I ended up with like a 30% win ratio of this tank after like 20 games, even though I felt like my combines were pretty good for a tier 9 premium TD, considering the scenarios that I found myself in. But alas, it started to get better towards the end, and I'm looking forward to giving it another go in the next few days. One thing that is nice, however, the credits, guys. Especially if you don't find yourself needing to fire so many gold rounds in this tank. Oh, the credits are lovely. So I'm just trying to create an ambush on this 5120 here. Cool. And then get down, Mr. President. I don't know what that 53 TP was doing. Maybe they just got that line for free. They don't have any field mods, so maybe the line for free. Who knows? Anyway, unfortunately, he kept the 5120 in the game. Wrong place, wrong time, Manticore, as we shut them down. And I've just got to try and think about the M4190 here. So what I want to do is actually get side on. And the reason why I want to get side on here is because if he tries to go in front of me, I can ram him to block him. And if he tries to slinky in behind, I can probably try and reverse to block him as well. Although I don't really have too many hit points, and so it can be quite awkward. And come on, reload, 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 reload. I intuition switch because I want to one-shot him with the HE, and we don't manage to. Maybe I should have just gone for the 750 damage there. But I was thinking, like, if I one-shot him, maybe he's not going to get back to be able to interrupt the cap circle. And yeah, let's just speed run this one out. So they kill the M4190, and then the IS-7 just sits there against the Leopard, and he can overmatch the entirety of the Leopard, but somehow doesn't manage to shoot the Leopard as he comes around the corner and gets killed, and the enemy team managed to cap out, and QQQQQ, I lose another game in the Jagdpanzer E90. Curses! So to come to a conclusion for the Jagdpanzer E90, do I think it's a good tank? No, I actually don't. I think this one is, in my opinion, below average for a tank destroyer. Look, you can still be effective in this tank by just going to the heavy flank and finding that dream position to be able to dump on your opponents. And as long as you still remain confident and don't get beat down by the beat downs that you likely receive, you will probably end up doing okay in this tank. However, statistically, it's just very inflexible. The armor doesn't really work out as much as you would want outside of those dream positions. The weak point on top is frustrating. The lower plate is horrific. The hit points are worse than the Jagdtiger. And while it has big alpha damage, the gold rounds are rather disappointing on this tank. Great for standard rounds for people who don't want to fire gold. And the damage per minute, it's just not a Jagdtiger. I would rather play the Jagdtiger. I would rather have that APCR gold pen, and I would rather rip and tear with 560 alpha damage every like 10 seconds rather than 750 every 15. Since the Jagdtiger got buffed last patch, I do feel like it is just the superior tank. But again, this one makes credits. And this one is also the second highest alpha damage on any premium in the game. It's just a bit of a shame that the Grom is lower tier than it with that 800 alpha. But remember that the Grom won't be able to have that good alpha at a decent distance. But you could play the ISU 152K, and the ISU 152K lower tier with the higher alpha as well, and comparable penetration actually at 286. But I guess with the ISU 152K, you don't have the hit points and the armor, and even the gun depression that this tank will have. So, I don't think the Jagdpanzer E90 is going to be kind of like the new best tier 9 premium tank destroyer. It has enough annoyances about it, and it's slow enough to mean that it ends up being quite frustrating in quite a few scenarios. So what my recommendation to you is to not overthink this tank. I was quite frustrated when I started playing it because it was kind of I felt like it was holding me back. And I think the tank will hold back good players. You just have to try and perfect what is important. And that is to make sure that you are using your gun depression as effectively as you can, and try to make sure you're trading as effectively as you can, and to realize you have to take hits to make hits. It's just a shame you don't have the alpha. And then my final realization. World of Tanks is meant to be fun. And this tank is a big fat German TD. So let's have a little bit of fun. Boom! On my side. But that's okay. And look, I'm not going to pretend this is the best trade ever, but there's just absolutely something majestic about the fact that we killed the new big fat whale loot box tank, which you have to open about 200 to be able to get, through crushing him and shooting him while we were on our side. And then we have all of our team see, oh, okay, job is done. Let's just roll past the big fat beached whale, the big fat German beached whale. And up, there we go, we're back at it again. And they can be able to get forwards. And yeah, whatever. We lost a huge amount of hit points there. Pretty much all of our hit points. But we're going to overmatch the T124, get around the corner, see if we can get a few more shots. Boom, Leopard done. 6k combined in sub 4 minutes. That's the end of the review here, pretty much. And that is, don't take this tank too seriously, okay, guys? it's not one for people who want to play like ultra sweaty and feel like they're going to have gigantic results like you'd have in, say, like a Gonkovica when it gets rolling forwards and really pumping. And the Gonkovica does the same thing where it tries to use as much of its gun depression as possible. It's just this thing has like that notch up. This one is more of a fun tank, I'd say. I'd say it's average to below average, in my opinion, for a tier 9 tank destroyer. But in some weird way, some German maniacal way, it can actually be a lot of fun when you do feel that you're just like, this is the line, I've made a line in the sand, and you're going to have to come and remove me from it. And if that's your kind of play style, then maybe the Jagdpanzer E90 will be the one for you. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full review on the Jagdpanzer E90. Really hope it was useful and gave you a few tips and tricks and maybe made you decide whether you want to try and get some loot boxes to try and get this tank or not. If it was, then give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, by the way, for daily YouTube videos all the way through December, and also so you can catch my remaining tank reviews as they go live. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the Jagdpanzer E90. Do you think it's a good tank? Do you think it's a bad tank? Do you think it's just an okay tank? Do you think it's frustrating that it has to, like, there's only a very few positions on very few maps that it's actually where it's effective? And do you think it's disappointing? Do you think it should have had more alpha damage? But I guess Wargaming probably didn't want to put multiple high tier, should I say, high alpha damage tanks going into all the loot boxes at the same time. My personal opinion is that I think that Wargaming probably should have given it an extra, like, 100, maybe 300 hit points. I think it could have been absolutely fine to be this kind of like big juggernaut, and maybe they could have just made the DPM even worse and increased that alpha damage up to 800 or something to kind of make it a little bit more like a Jagdpanzer E100, maybe even given it 350 heat. That's what I would have preferred to have done with this vehicle. I think that they found this, instead of going like, here's a Jagdpanzer E100 and here's like a Jagdtiger, and they've tried to kind of go in between, but it kind of just loses the flavor of both of the vehicles for it. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.